morning, Lucas.
Good morning, Vincentas.
It's really nice to see you today on our channel, YouTube channel, and we are going to have a short discussion about education, some education issues in Czechia, in Czech Republic, about education system, and possible about some other interesting issues. And today we have Lukáš Richterek from Palacký University in Olomouc, from Czech Republic, and possible he is mainly his interest, scientific interest, mainly related to science education, mechanics, physics education, etc. But possible Lukáš will introduce himself in more details for our channel viewers. Please, Lukáš.
Yes, thanks, Vincentas, for inviting me to this discussion. I teach at Palacký University in Olomouc, which is the second oldest university in the Czech Republic. We have about 23,000 of students and 8 faculties, including my faculty of science, and we also have a faculty of education, which is important in relation to education and preparation of future teachers. I personally studied at Palacký University in Olomouc, teaching of math and physics, and then I continued with my PhD in Masaryk University in Brno. My PhD topic was the exact solutions of Einstein equation, or some classes of those solutions. But I must say that during my study, I was lucky to meet many people with very wide interests. So, for instance, my supervisor of my master thesis was the co-author of the first book about yoga in the Czech Republic, and the supervisor of my PhD thesis, Professor Jan Novotný from Brno, is also interested in literature. He regularly writes an essays to Literary Review here in Olomouc, and he also translates books. For instance, he is the main translator of books by John Barrow, English cosmologists, mathematicians, and also playwright who was interested in some connection between faith, religion, and science. He was also rewarded by the Templeton Prize, John Barrow, and my supervisor was the main translator of his books into the Czech language. So this is the background. And since my study years, I was also involved in Physics Olympiad. Now I'm responsible for organizing in Olomouc region and also for setting problems for the secondary level pupils. We say 7, 8, and 9 class in our basic schools. So that's probably my background. I'm also interested in history of science and philosophy of science. I also teach courses about the philosophy of science, not only in Olomouc, but also at Silesian University in Opava. So maybe this is the...
Yes, thank you, Lukáš. It's really a good and large background, quite detailed. And also I want to add some words, because I am not, let's say, deeply familiar with Olomouc at your university in particular, but anyway, I have visited the Olomouc and university many times, and it's really nice city and nice university. And by the way, it's somehow close to our Vilnius University, because Vilnius University also was established in 1579. It's anyway also old university with
so nearly the same time as our university.
Nearly the same time, and both universities are quite impressive, with long historical tradition and with good background. Sometimes we argue also with colleagues that why do we need such discussions or different discussions, etc. But from my understanding, it's quite interesting, because first of all, this is diverse perspectives, and scholars from different countries brings different diverse cultural, social, and educational perspectives, and let's say, enhancing in discussions with scientists from different countries allows for us to gain different insights and to gain different perspectives, alternative approaches to education, etc. And next, we know possible well that education somehow is global concern, and enhancing ideas, exchanging ideas with scholars from different countries helps in developing a more comprehensive and more detailed, again, global understanding of different educational issues. This is not intellectually enriching, but also contributes in different aspects to the development of more effective and inclusive educational practices. Okay, let's start to our first part, more or less global issues, and to discuss shortly about educational system in your country. And traditionally, I want to ask about education system in general. Possible you can describe to some extent, and what is the education system in Czech Republic today?
Yes, I would just comment what you said, that I think it's a source of inspiration, those discussions. Of course, not everything is transferable from one country to another, but I think in general we can recognize some common features in our educational system, and of course some differences which are connected with different history and so on. Well, our system is considered to be traditional. We have a compulsory school attendance since 1774, from the time where the Czech lands were part of Habsburg Empire. So it was introduced by Maria Theresia, the compulsory attendance, and I think it's quite similar to other educational systems. I think we have a lot in common with Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, and maybe Germany. For instance, I think the general secondary school or grammar school or gymnasia, as we say in Czech, were established in the 19th century according to Prussia or German patterns and examples. So we have in common. So we have several stages. It's quite common that there's some preschool education. According to OECD report, the percentage of children who attend the preschool, I mean below the 6 age of 6 year of their age, is about 90%, and it's lower than, for instance, in Lithuania. And I think in 2016 there was introduced such a compulsory the last year before the school, just to prepare the children to enter the school, because I think one of the problems we feature is quite a large number of children who are recognized as not ready for school attendance at 6 years, which is a typical year. So they are given, let's say, some delay, and they start with school attendance at 7. So the attempt is to at least the last year at kindergarten or nursery school to give them a better preparation for entering the school. I think one of the features is that we have in European average quite a long maternity leave. So usually, typically women are supported for 3 years to stay with children. That probably means that the attendance in the child care and nursery school is a little bit lower than in other countries. Then we have the compulsory school attendance from 6 to 15, which means primary school, 5 years, and then the second level of primary school, which means the 6, 7, 8, and 9 class. But after the 1990, after the changes, when we became a democratic country again, we introduced back, according to the tradition from the years before the war, a parallel way and selective way, let's say a lower grammar school. So you have two passes. You can pass a basic school up to the 9th year, and then to have 4 years, 3 or 4 years secondary school, vocational or technical. And then you have grammar schools, which may be also 4 years, but some grammar school may be entered after the 5th class, or after the 7th class. So that is a parallel way, which is intended like a selection for academic career or university career for better preparation based on the content like medicine, law, economy, and so on. And then, of course, we have some tertiary level universities, some practical higher school, and then, of course, PhD level. This is, I think, similar like in many countries. But this system of, let's say, 8 years or 6 years grammar school, not only 4 years, is taken from German and Austrian tradition, and it's now discussed quite in details whether there was a good step in 90s, because in the 90s the development was rather spontaneous, not very controlled by the Ministry of Education. So it was something like coming back to what was working, let's say, 60 years ago. But now with the discussion about inclusive education, it discussed that this selection maybe is not an ideal feature. But I think it's so strongly established that it will remain at least for the following years to be a part of the system, because some parents are highly demanding that.
Yeah. And Lukas, you mentioned about gymnasium. It's because in Lithuania also we have pro-gymnasium and gymnasium. Pro-gymnasium, usually it's up to 8th grade, and 4 years, the last interval is so-called gymnasium. And is it the same in Czechia?
Well,
what does it mean gymnasium in Czech version?
We have typically 4-year gymnasium, which follows after the 9th years of the basic school. But as I said, the other trajectory is to have just 5 years at the basic school and to enter gymnasium. And usually, as an institution, it's together. For instance, my wife is teaching at gymnasium, and this school has just 4-year gymnasium, but also 8-year gymnasium, and also 6-year gymnasium. That's a special that some gymnasiums have just 6 years. So you have 7 years at basic school and then 6 years at gymnasium. And it's typical for gymnasium which are special. For instance, this school where my wife is teaching is so-called English branch. So they have a stronger teaching in English, and after 2 years of intensive English preparation, they have subject like math, physics, history, geography in English. And in Olomouc, we have also a French gymnasium, 6-year French gymnasium at another school, which is very similar, but in France. And those grammar schools are something like a mixture between the Czech school system and curriculum and the English or French curriculum, because they are based on their textbooks and their system.
Okay. And because before this discussion, also I tried to find different information and to read more about Czech education system. And also you mentioned in our previous communication, that after, let's say, or during last 35 years, different reforms, etc., somehow education in a Czech way. What do you mean by this expression? So interesting.
Well, I mean that, from the political point of view, we are under the permanent reform, because before every election, most of the parties comes that education is their first line or their priority, and that they want to reform something. I would say that on a local level, it works, because if you come to most villages, the building which is really repaired and looks nice are mostly schools. So on a local level, it really works, but on a national level, I think it's much worse. I think one of the features of our school is also that we have quite a lot of small schools, up to 150 pupils. I think more than 50% of basic schools is just a small, and still is considered like some feature of a quality of life in small villages in some region to keep the school. So even if the village has to support it financially, they usually decide to do that because they feel that to have a school is something which is important for the people to have them there. Well, on the other side, when I make some statistic yesterday preparing for this interview, the Czech Republic was established in 1993 after splitting Czechoslovakia. And within the 30 years, we have 21 Ministry of Education. So the half-life of Ministry of Education is something like 1.5 years. And as you can imagine, for some conceptual development, it's not ideal because usually new people come, new people set some new direction or a little bit new directions. And so that means that the changes or coordination of the changes is not very good. And just an example, which is quite fresh, I think 2 days, there was a reform of applications for secondary school. Because, as I said, one of the features is that the selective gymnasia, 8 or 6 years, are quite demanded. So there is a lot of application. And after last year disputations, the ministry said that there will be new electronic system of applying, which was supposed to run on Wednesday, but it collapsed immediately. I think within a few hours it collapsed. Now it's supposed to be in function tomorrow, but the Ministry of Education asked the parents not to apply at once, just not to overload the system. So there's one example of something which is coordinated from the Ministry of Education. I think we have several stages within those 30 years. As I already said, in 90s, it was like a spontaneous, and the changes were run or supported from teachers, from the parents. So it was something which works naturally, though it has some features like coming back to the selective grammar schools like that. Then in 2004, the Ministry of Education introduced so-called national curricula, and which was a change because before that the main concentration was on content of education. The national curriculum reform was concentrating on competences. So there was a set of national curriculum, and each school was forced to prepare the school curriculum for subject and for them. But the support from the ministry was minimal. So usually the change was formal. From the side of many teachers, they just copied what they do in past years. And I think even in PISA tests, for instance, in maths, there was a decline in 2006 and 2009 testing after this reform. So that was a little bit change forced by that. Then in 2011, a state matura exam was introduced. And again, they were not clear what's the reason, because some people say, well, the reason of matura exam is just to put some minimal level, because we have now about a quarter of private secondary school. Some of them are really prestigious, and some of them are, well, disputable. That was one aim, just to put minimal level. The other people say, well, it should be something like which enables students to enter universities. And it's something which is very difficult to fulfill again, because if you have a variety of secondary schools like grammar schools and vocational schools, to give one exam for all of them and then say it may work like entering university, it cannot be, because yes, for some university programs like teaching, we usually offer entering without applications, without any entering exam. But on the other hand, demanded programs like medicine, law, economic, have psychology, for instance, have so many applicants that they cannot just take students that they pass this matura level exam and to allow them to enter university. They must select anyway. So, it was introduced, and we are still discussing what's the reason or what's the main purpose of it. Probably now it's clear that it's setting some minimal level. And I think the third important thing is that in 2016, we started with inclusive education or inclusive reform. And, we in Czech have a saying that the devil is hidden in details, because, of course, or implementation, because in general, of course, an inclusive education is important. I suppose we will talk later on about the problems we have with some communities and region in our country, which there are differences between them. But the way how it was done, again, without support for the teachers, was a little bit problematic. So still, there are some people who say, well, the way how it was done was a little bit problematic. And now, just now, because, we have, after COVID, we have quite a huge national debt, which increased in the last years enormously. So our today's government is trying to save money, and it's connected also with the inclusive education, because one of the features was that the school have the possibilities to pay for school assistants. So it's quite common that the basic schools you have 1, 2, sometimes 3 assistants in a class together with teacher. But of course, it costs money. So now the Ministry of Education is trying to increase the overload, to cut off this support in this way. So it's really open now how it will proceed. And another way is that after this inclusive education, it enormously increased the demand for the selective schools. So that was one of the results, that the parents are voting that they are trying even more frequently to take their children from the basic school and to put it into some selective school, which is also typical for ministers of education. I think 15 years ago, we had some example that a Ministry of Education at the time put her girl into a very prestigious private school, which was criticized that she didn't believe to the state school and to the system she has under command.
Yes, it's really a lot of different problems and issues. For example, Lithuania also implementing so-called inclusive educational model, and in particular from the September 2024, all schools should be prepared to implement, let's say, inclusive educational model. And now with preparation process also, and a lot of challenges, obviously. Let's a little bit return back to, you mentioned some obviously problems, but okay, let's start from positive things, because let's continue from positive things, because what are the best things or best issues about Czech education system shortly?
Well, I think in general, according, for instance, to OECD reports, we are still over the average in some international research testing like PISA or PIRLS. That's another feature, that these are the main sources of information about our school system. Of course, we have some Czech inspectorate who is visiting schools and issuing reports, but I think the main comparison is given by those testing. So mathematician literacy, science literacy, and reading literacy is still over the average of OECD. Though there is a decline. I think just in December there was released the report from the 2022 testing, and the decline in maths is statistically important in that. Also, there was an incline in Finland. I have noticed that in Lithuania it's not statistically important, so you are better at that. And maybe it's a part of the COVID period, because we are still reflecting this part. But I would say that the tradition and traditionally the vocational education preparing for the crafts and so on was considered as a strong feature. And I would say, from the point of view of preparing physics teachers and also chemistry teachers, for instance, a good feature is the community of teachers. For instance, we have every year meeting like physics teacher invention fair or chemistry teachers invention fair, where voluntarily the teachers from various kind of school meet together, they exchange their ideas, their methods, what to do in class. So these communities are working very well. From the point of view of physics teaching, there is also an important project, Heureka, called According to Archimedes, which is run by Irina Dvořáková from Charles University in Prague, who really supports teachers during the year. They have some weekend sessions for support for young teachers, for teachers who are not qualified as physics teachers, but for instance, like geography, and they are supposed to teach physics at school, so give them permanent, long time support. So I would say at the local or the level in the teaching community, it is quite good. Even because nowadays the Ministry of Education is changing the national curriculum, mostly reducing the content of the subject like physics and chemistry. And it was fascinating that I think more than 200 teachers were able to come for a weekend to discuss about the content, what can be released and what should be as a compulsory part for the national curriculum. So I would say at this level there are still many teachers who are interested in the topic and interested in improvement of their teaching and sharing their ideas with other teachers.
Okay. Obviously, it's not we can discuss only about positive things and quite a lot. Obviously, there are many more. But okay, let's think a little bit in opposite way, because also a few days ago, just searching on internet, googling, I found one interesting title: "What is wrong with Czech educational system?" quite a challenging title of one possible paper or so. And okay, what's the worst things about your system? Can you mention at least?
Well, I think that traditionally in the international testing or researches and also in OECD report, we are reported the attitude of pupils to school. That is on average not very good. And that's one feature. And then I have already mentioned it, and probably we will discuss it even later on. It's that our school system is evidently reproducing the socio-economic level or the family level of the students. So there are differences between schools not so big within one school, but between the schools, selective schools or non-selective schools, and also between some regions in our republic. Of course, I guess that in many countries the capital is different than the rest of the countries. So in all statistics, the Prague, for instance, and Brno, like the biggest cities, have the highest percentage of people with higher education diplomas, which have education as a value. So families are supporting their children to learn, to gain better education. On the other hand, we have regions with a low percentage of higher education parents, and then it's reproduced in the results that also their children are not very well motivated to education, and the school is not able to change it. On the other hand, I must say it's very difficult for the school. If you imagine you have 20 or even 30 pupils in your class, to change or to go against the community in which the child is living. So it's not so easy to change. But this is generally said that that's a typical feature. But I don't know what was the report or the news you mentioned about.
Yes, that's quite long report, but the mainly attractive title, "What is wrong with Czech education system?" It's I possibly will read in more details later on. But again, also I have read that many Czech students face educational limitations, some educational limitations due to social economical status. Is it true, or can you shortly comment on this?
Yes, that's it, and I think it's typical that, and it's interesting because we are 80 years after the Second War, or nearly 80 years after the Second War, and this is typical. The worst results from state matura, from PISA, TIMSS, PIRLS testing is still in the regions which were typically inhabited by German-speaking population before the war. So there were regions at the southwest, west, northwest, and north of the Czech Republic. We call them sometimes Sudeten or Sudety regions. And the original inhabitants were forced to go away, typically to Germany, and new inhabitants came. There were typically industrial regions with, for instance, some parts even with mining industry or with strong, let's say, agriculture, like a forest economy. And so these were people like gypsy communities, for instance, where education was not traditionally evaluated, and it's still visible on those educational results. It's visible on political preferences. So these regions are still different. Even we have more than or nearly 80 years after the war. So that's really the fact, and that's one of the problems we have, and it's a task for inclusive education.
Yeah, because it's obviously, despite that, let's say from first look, it seems that at least in Europe, all educational systems more or less are the same, no any differences, etc., or some other issues. But for example, because we have also with my master students, in particular one module about educational systems and innovations, usually for second year master students, and we're discussing about different educational systems worldwide, obviously, and traditionally students preparing some reports, some presentations about educational system outside Europe, let's say, from different other continents like in Asia or Latin America, etc. And in particular, last year, time is running quite fast. In the middle of November, I visited Taiwan. Impressive country, and also we visited many schools, different schools, elementary, primary schools, and I was surprised that it's obviously were different so interesting moments. For example, we visited Lankan Elementary School in Chiai City, and this school, despite that it's elementary up to 6th grade, fully oriented to astronomical education. And all school, all school is immersed in astronomy. Everything, including starting from environment, from class equipment, teachers, etc. Kids, so impressive. And in another school also we had an opportunity to observe some lessons, and in particular, for example, so-called invention lessons. And this is a typical format of lessons, students learning how to invent something from a very simple material, for example, and to make something useful, etc. So creative approach, so interesting, and also oriented to practice, to practical work. Okay, and let's continue in relation to previous question. Again, I found the information that one of the main weaknesses of Czech education system is the unbalanced quality of teaching across regions. But as far as I know, generally Czechia is not relatively obviously it's not a big country. Do you think really it's some differences, some serious differences among regions, between the regions?
Yes, I would say it's confirmed by several reports, also by OECD, or even with the Czech Inspectorate report, that there are bigger differences between regions and schools than within the school. So that means that some kind of pupils is concentrated in school. Of course, I would like to mention that one of the features which is probably positive, or I think definitely positive, is that there are some alternative schools, because there are a group of parents, usually some educated parents who want some changes. So we have alternative school like Montessori, Waldorf school, let's say wood kindergarten, where children spend a lot of time outside with outside activities and so on. And I find it positive in the sense that it may bring some inspiration and enrich the system. The question is whether it should be the mainstream, but it definitely enriches. But back to your question, yes, that's the fact. If you compare the schools in Prague, which are highly competitive, and the Prague, of course, is also taking the students from the surrounding region, so it's very competitive, and so the results are much better. And the motivation of the students in this competitive environment is much higher than, for instance, and the west of Bohemia, which is the region, the smallest region without any university of high school, just one branch of a university which is settled in another region, and with most population with lower education and parents, and so the motivation of the children is lower. So yes, the differences are, and again, it's stressed that it should be one of the moments for the change. Maybe I should mention that in 2020 there was adopted another document, so-called Strategy 2030 Plus, which comes with the outlines for not only 10 years, but with outlines to that. And the inclusive education is again one of the priorities. Another priorities are reducing of the content. then a concentration of formative assessment, digital education, and things like support of the teacher, and of course the question of financing of the educational system. So we have these documents which were adopted, and some of the features are now implemented. So, but I think still we have reports that they confirm that unfortunately we have the differences between region and between some layers, socio-economic layers. That's true.
It's quite possible, somehow common feature for many countries, not only for Czechia or, for example, Lithuania, because in Lithuania also, despite that Lithuania is obviously smaller than Czechia, but we also have some serious differences, and for many years this is so-called school networks optimization process is on the progress, and many small schools were closed or currently under the process to be closed, and it's quite sensitive issue. For example, in different municipalities and municipalities or also local communities trying to keep school alive, but it's from one side it's quite a huge investment from financial point of view. And if you have, for example, let's say 50 or up to 100 students, it's possible, not reasonable to keep such school. What is the situation, let's say, in this regard in Czechia, for example, with optimization, or let's say with small schools in villages, for example?
Well, it is discussed, and of course, from the economical point of view, for instance, as you say, it makes sense to concentrate larger schools in some, let's say, regional towns and so on. But as I said, still, our educational system has, in case of basic schools, which are the part of compulsory school attendance mainly, we have more than 50% of schools which have less than 150 students. So, and it's still for many villages, for many local authorities, they take it to be a value to have a school. And I remember my wife, when she started her career it was quite a large village in South Moravia. The school was offering something to the village itself. They have a small swimming pool which was open to the public on weekends. They have a library which was provided to the public in the afternoon. So it's still taken that the school serves to the community. On the other hand, the quite different situation is around the big cities, because first, usually around big cities like Prague and Brno, it's quite easy to get into those big cities because many people go for work, so there are a lot of connections to go there, and then therefore in those surroundings it's quite natural that the pupils or the students go with their parents to the big cities. So in Prague and Brno and it works that there are bigger schools concentrated in those big cities, but in the countryside it's really split it off. But as you say, even in our country there is a discussion that it's too much and that we should reduce because it costs money, of course.
Yeah, but it's not everything should be or can be based on money only. Another argument, at least in Lithuania, quality of education, because the main argument is that in bigger schools it's more possibilities to organize educational process at appropriate level, to organize different equipments, for example, labs, what is important for, let's say, science education, etc., etc. But for example, I would say my school, my native school from my childhood, at that time, it were mainly around 250 or 300 students. And currently, the school is not closed in full, but this school became like a department or branch of a gymnasium, of bigger gymnasium, approximately 11 or 12 kilometers distance. And this is quite typical now in Lithuania, that some small schools reducing, for example, from pro-gymnasium or so-called basic or middle school, returning back to just primary level and becoming like branch of bigger schools, bigger gymnasiums. Let's say number of schools generally dramatically reduced during the last, let's say, 5 years. And the same, not so strong, but more or less the same approach was implemented during last 5 years with universities, with higher education sector, and some universities were closed also, or became a branch of, like, obviously our previous Šiauliai University, which currently is closed, and only Šiauliai Academy as a branch of Vilnius University, operating as a branch of structural branch of Vilnius University. And for example, in Vilnius, previously well-known Vilnius Pedagogical University, or later on University of Educational Sciences, also currently is fully closed. And now this is another reform, because in Lithuania we have a binary tertiary education system. It means that tertiary level consists from universities and colleges, or so-called non-university study programs. And now this another optimization process, another reform in relation to colleges. Again, the idea is to reduce number of colleges. Some criteria were established recently, for example, number of students, etc. And for example, some colleges possible will be closed in the near future. And what shortly about Czechia, about your universities?
Well, yes, I think that now the number is not changing. I would say that within the last 5 years, I would say that you are right with the primary schools, that most of the basic schools which are in small villages have just the primary level, and then for the secondary level the students have to go to the town. So that's typical and should be added to what I have said. With universities and colleges, I think the number of state universities or state colleges is constant for, I would say, at least 5 years. There are private schools, and I think their number was reduced a little bit within a few years, because we have, for instance, one private tertiary school with just 6 students, which was, of course, suspicious, and so some quality of some of them was disputable. But I would say there is no press. There is another intention, an intention to divide those schools, those universities and colleges, into 2 groups. One, which is considered to be prestigious, are called research universities. And those universities are allowed to build their own program themselves for some periods. For instance, our university has this status, so we can introduce new study programs when they are approved within the university level, but it's not necessary to approve them by the national authorities if they are consistent with the branches of education that were approved for our university. So, for instance, we cannot start with mining because we have not approved education in mining industry, but we can approve new programs in education, in arts, and so on, because we were allowed. And then there are mostly colleges and some small universities who have no right to introduce new programs without the approval of the National Ministry of Education or National Board of Accreditation of Study Programs. So that was the reform which started, I would say, 6 years ago, and so to split those schools. And I think it's naturally expected that those research universities will be more demanded and more supported. I think they are supported even in the part of financing for the research results. That are there some higher coefficients for their support, so they have more chances for development. But I think there is no official tendency to close some school. But yes, it may be naturally done if they are not approved to open their programs or stop their programs. But I think for last 5 years, the number of colleges and or tertiary education institution is nearly constant, not changing very much. And another feature is that some schools have their branches in some, let's say, regions that they do not have their own university of tertiary school education. So, for instance, in the north of our region, there is a branches of economy school in Jeseník, which is surrounded in the mountains, and it's rather separated from the rest of the country. And the same is in the west of Bohemia, in Karlovy Vary region or Karlsbad region, quite popular, where again is a branch of Western University from Pilsen, West Bohemian University in Pilsen. They have those branches. But I would say that those branches are mainly oriented to management, economy, and things like that, not, for instance, for science or education.
Okay, Lukas, let's continue a little bit to another perspective. It's obviously related, but for example, I also found some, doesn't matter in detail, some quite recent study, like a pilot possible study with students, and for example, nearly all of the students said something like that role of education is to prepare students for life, society, and the future profession, etc. But more interestingly, that 30% said that the purpose of education is to get a degree title, because in the Czech Republic you are nobody without it.
Yes, I think there is a formal pressure, especially from the state organs. I think if you want to get a post in some state institution like regional authorities and state organ, it's usually very formally demanded that you should have some degree. So it makes that the students are very pragmatic. For instance, if you work for the police and you have some career development within the police and army, and again, for some degrees, it's demanded that you should have some degree. And in fact, it doesn't matter which degree it is, I mean the topic of the degree, but for instance, for some level, you must have bachelor degree, for some level, you must have a master degree. So, for instance, my colleagues in South Bohemia, at the physics department, they have courses for policemen, and physics, and they say it's quite good for them because they have only a few students of physics, but these courses and programs for the policemen are demanded because the policemen need the degree just to go up into the structure of the police. So yes, that's very formal. I would say that it's traditional, and maybe it's inherited from Austrian Empire, that I think even Einstein, when he was in Prague, he was complaining about these formal degrees and formalities and many of paper making and so on, many administrative. So yes, for the state institution, it's really demanded. And it's taken to be pragmatic because if you work for the state, you are expected to have a pension when you are retired, so some social background. On the other hand, in private sector, it's not so strict because in private sector, it's oriented on what you are able to do. So you may be employed even without a formal degree if you work for a private company, for instance. Or more or less big companies like Škoda car company, they have their own courses, their own programs. So when you start to work for them, they will send you for some half-year course to prepare you for the specific position you are supposed to do.
And again, it's quite interesting. Another aspect, for example, yesterday I also listened on, probably it was on TV, short report about situation in vocational schools in Lithuania, because now it's accepting or recruiting new students, and this is quite let's say a clear trend in Lithuania that, for example, people who already have degree, higher education, after universities, after colleges, etc., they continue, or let's say returning to vocational schools in order to obtain particular profession, for example, and also it's quite interesting trend.
Well, I don't know how in Lithuania, but I think in Czech Republic it's a shortage of craftsmen. For instance, we are also asking and exchanging with my colleagues and friends, just give me a good plumber, for instance. Give me an address, because it's quite difficult. And if you order them, it's usually a quarter of a year or a half year interval before they say, oh, I'm fully occupied, sorry, I'm not available. Well, one trend is that we have vocational schools, and from the young people, there is a decreasing number of students who enter those vocational schools, though we have a long tradition of that. So the percentage is lower. But on the other hand, I'm not sure about the trend of people coming back to craft. I know, of course, several people who were formally educated and then they open their company and they are doing something manually. Because on the other hand, if you want to start with your business, it's formally required to have at least a matura. So I remember my schoolmate who studied to be a teacher, but she helped to her parents who want to run just a shop at the village, but to have their company, to be as an independent employer, they need to have a matura, which was not their case. So officially, the company was written on her name because she was educated, and in fact, her parents were working there. So again, there is some formal requirement to have your business to have at least some degree, because another way is we have quite a difficult tax system, which opens a lot of position for some tax advisors and people like that, because for people with not a good education, it's quite difficult to fulfill all the demands and to work with the system. But yes, I think there is a shortage, and many people of industry and is talking about that we have a shortage of people working manually and working with craft. So maybe it's again in common. I think this is a phenomena that a lot of people is allowed to go to the West. I think 5 years ago or 6 years ago, there was a feature. If you go to Britain, there was a typical to have a Polish plumber because there were no British plumber. I think for our people, some physicians, like medical absolvents, graduates, go to Britain or Germany to work at that position there because they are better paid. Or some nurses in hospitals go to Britain, to Germany to work there. And on the other hand, we have doctors from Ukraine and nurses from Ukraine, which is now even more frequent because of the refugees that came after the 2022.
Yeah, it's that's right. It's quite typical because, for example, also not my personal, but my for example daughter some years ago, after let's say high education level, because she graduated as physiotherapist or kinesiotherapist, and she also continued in vocational school in order to get the program was massage qualification as massagist, and she finished successfully, and currently she have two let's say qualifications, and she's working now in a hospital. It's very good, and in addition she continue another study program, so-called applied physiology, and it's quite common. Okay, let's continue a little bit to another aspect. Again, I found some also discussion that possibly it's not only in Czechia, but so-called certain disproportion between educational objectives at different levels of schools, for example, and also possible more or less the same in Lithuania and in Czechia, that so deep discussions about preschool education level, and because more and more children entering, for example, elementary school or kindergarten level from nursery are missing even basic motor skills, such as, for example, ability to dress themselves or even tie their own shoelaces, etc. But on the other hand, what is interesting, the same children, let's say, often exposed to tablets and smartphones and other technological devices, and often dominates, for example, English language, obviously, etc. And one survey some years ago, I found also in Czechia, showed that around 35, let's say, % of children between the age of 3 and 5 years of age can play a computer game. Around 50% are able to use mobile phones and other devices, while on the other hand, only 20 or 22% of children are able to swim, and only 12 or 14% can tie their shoelaces, etc. We can continue more details, but doesn't matter. This is really problematic.
Yes, it is. I feel that in general there are some streams by parents and even some educators who stress the idea that the children should be left to develop themselves and not to force it to do something. While many things you are talking about, like swimming, dressing up, needs a kind of drill, and sometimes forcing the child to do something which is not so attractive, because it might be more comfortable to sit down and to play with the mobile. And another feature which is discussed sometimes is that in some families there is quite a short time the people spend in together. So it's not so easy to take those habits from the, let's say, adult persons, because they spend a lot of time at work and things like that. And another feature is there is a great shift that, of course, I guess the similar discussion will be also in your country, that because of the prolonging the lifetime, we are shifting the retirement time to the higher and higher ages. And I am really grateful that when I have children, or I have 2 daughters, when we have them, we have a grandmother at our disposal. So when I had to go to work and they were ill, there was a grandmother ready to come and to take care of them. Now it's much more difficult because the grandmothers are still in active life and they have to go to work themselves. So it is not so easy. And then, of course, another feature which is, again, I think common is that we are still bound to the typical structure of the family, but now there's a high percentage of families which are divorced. And I'm very skeptical, for instance, with so-called mixed care, where child is 1 week with one parent and another week with other parents, which means that there is no, let's say, safe place to come back and to return every day. But yes, I think in general it's a trend against a drill, against forcing doing things, and it's bad, for instance, for maths, because I'm deeply sure that maths, which is building up the abilities, needs something to be drilled, to be more automatized, not just invent and think about that. And now there is a great pressure on not to force. And I think even my wife has said, which is the secondary school level, that some, especially boys who are very intelligent and who are able to find with inventions, have problems when they go to the traditional four-year gymnasium, and when they are supposed to learn some algorithm or to follow some way because it's more efficient, it's better, they are usually opposed to that because they are used that they are able to find out their own way, and now it's unpleasant for them just to follow some way which was done by somebody else. So yes, that's true.
And now I remember that obviously you know also our common colleague from Latvia, Professor Andris Broks, who usually is saying or raising a question, what education for what life? And so simple answer, good education for good life. But in relation to that, for example, having in mind this current context, I mean geopolitical context, this war, so aggressive war in Ukraine, Russia against Ukraine, and also in Lithuania, I don't know, possibly you will say about Czech Republic, but in Lithuania also we try to discuss about different, let's say, possibilities how to survive in case in different difficult conditions, for example, etc., etc. And it seems again to our in relation to our previous discussion, the main problem with practical skills, with practical life skills, for example, because possibly it's not enough to have good skills in technology like computers, mobile phones, etc., but some real practical skills, how to survive in difficult conditions. And this is really a big question. And not only, let's say, older generation, but for example, young generation, let's say, lack in skills, in so practical skills.
Yes, but I think this demand was at the base of, for instance, the Scout movement, which is quite popular in our republic, because I think Baden-Powell, when he started with the movement, the first idea was how to survive in some conditions. As you say, we are used to technology and we are strongly dependent on technology. We can imagine how difficult it is when the electricity is switched off. How many things is not working yet. And yes, that may concern. So I would say that sometimes those skills are developed for some children at their free time with the Scout movement. And for the school system, it's the disputation is affected by the way that I, as a child, and I guess that probably you have the same, because it was under the communist regime. We have a subject which was called, I don't know how to say in English, but it was a preparation for severe conditions. Let's say how to survive in the chemical attack in this way. And, for me, this subject was too much politically affected. So it was full of propaganda against West Germany and things like that. So now we are discussing whether to introduce in some way back again. But still, because most of the teachers are my generation, I think nearly 60% of teachers is between 40 and 60 at our school. So most of us still have the remembrance of this subject, so we are not very keen about that. But probably
right. For example, in Lithuania, I also remember during my school years we had a special subject like civil defense or something like that.
Yeah. That's
it was obviously it was somehow politically oriented at some extent, but anyway, we learned something. We learned all kids, all children learned something. And for example, currently in Lithuania, already from the last year, it was so deep discussion because we started to introduce so-called new subject life skills program, but this program, let's say, originated very deep and hard debates, and because it's somehow possible, not mostly, but so seriously oriented to different gender issues, some minorities, etc., but not to real life skills, etc. And so deep discussion till now, including some protests from parents, from communities, schools, etc.
Yes, I fully agree, because it seems to me that the world as a whole is rather unstable now. With a war in Ukraine, there's a conflict in the Near East between Israel and Palestinians, and there is still a great tension in Asia, China and Taiwan. Now North Korea is a quite dangerous country in some way, and I'm afraid that at the end of this year we will be given Donald Trump again at the position of the American president. So the instability is quite hard. And in relation in education, yes, I would say that even in our country we are discussing something like civil defense. But as you say, it might be then turned. It depends on the details and how it's introduced. Because yes, again, also in our country, the topics like gender, minorities are also important. I would say why not? But at sometimes when we are discussing with colleagues, for instance, from Malta and other, I think that it's quite problematic that many of those features like gender or well-being are very much subjective, and it's difficult to make them in some way more objective, because it depends on inner feelings, inner projections, and so it's quite difficult to make them something like some measurable aim of education.
Okay, Lukas, it's really interesting to discuss, but a lot of issues, a lot of different interesting and let's say topical issues. But anyway, let's turn a little bit to our second part, or our favorite part, also my favorite part, science education, because you represent in particular physics area, and but quite often we can read that physics education is somehow in a critical state, possible not only in your country, not only in Lithuania, and having in mind some international studies and some international reports. In many countries, level of scientific literacy is somehow in the middle, or so-called mediocre, or even less, and students are considered poorly prepared to meet the challenges of the future. Can you comment on this?
Well, I don't know whether to say in a critical state, but I would agree that if you compare the number of young people who are interested in studying physics programs, is quite low. And I think it's in most West Europe. The situation is similar, and of course it's concerning also the number of students who are studying physics education or preparing to become teachers of physics. One thing is that the physics is not very popular subject, especially on the upper secondary level. I would say that at the lower secondary level, it's quite popular because it's mostly based on experiments, discovering things like that. But then, traditionally in our curriculum comes more math.
And possible it's somehow at integrated, in integrated mode. I mean, like STEAM, not let's say like separate subject.
Yes. Well, it's not so common in our country to have integrated subject like science, for instance. But it's becoming a little bit more popular in the sense that there is a shortage of teachers for particular subjects. So one way how to go around this is to unify them in some way, because you have then a teacher who can teach them. Because formally, from the point of law, in our country, once you have studied any education branch, like teaching Czech language or music, you are qualified to teach any other subject at the school. So that's according to law. And for instance, with physics teachers, we have only 60% of teachers who were studying physics. With chemistry, it's much better. I think only 22% is not qualified in chemistry from those who teach. But the change is that the chemistry is starting, I think, 2 years later than physics at the secondary school level. So yes, there is a trend to find some topics, for instance, for project days. It's an ideal if many schools have project days, let's say at the end of the school year and before Christmas, where the schedule is not so fixed or a little bit released, to have projects. And in projects, then they try to join more teachers and students from various interests to have some topics. I think a typical topics from STEM is, for instance, water, because you can judge it from physical point of view, chemistry point of view. Then it's important for biology, of course. It's interesting and can be discussed from geographical point of view. So yes, I think we have also a few, but only a few textbooks which are based on those unifying topics, for instance, energy, water, and so on. And another discussion is, that's my experience from Finland, when we were 1 week in Jyväskylä meeting the schools and studying their system. That they have the system that only 6 weeks or 8 weeks is obligatory for those subjects like physics, chemistry, and then you can build as a student your own curriculum. So it's interesting to find out what's the core, what they consider to be the most important to have for everybody, from physics, from chemistry, and so on. So I think, for instance, energy is one of those topics. And it's, I think, important also on university level, because personally I teach, for instance, courses of physics for biologists or for chemists. So definitely I'm forced to find some examples in nature that explain some physics phenomena but are related to their subject or some medical subject. I think a great book from that point of view is an American book, Physics for the Future Presidents. That's by Miller. That gives the topics which are considered, even for the politician, to be qualified to judge some, for instance, energy topics, energetics topics to learn from physics. So yes, the trend goes in that direction.
Yes, in Lithuania, it's also somehow, let's say, STEAM movement on the progress, and in particular, it's important for me because my, for example, PhD studies and PhD thesis were directly related to integrated science teaching, science subjects teaching, and because my background is chemistry and biology, and it was quite common. But having in mind that it was last century, 1993, 1998, I defended in 1998. It was really common. But having in mind now STEAM education, it's anyway, it's based on integration processes. It's integrated approach at some extent. And for example, in Lithuania, it's somehow focused not only to upper secondary school level or lower secondary school level, but also including kindergarten and primary schools, because also important, and etc. But anyway, I will be possibly more pessimistic because physics as a school subject suffers from a bad reputation, let's say. Only fewer students choose physics for their career, at least in Lithuania. And
yes, it's the same.
For example, previously, as I mentioned, in Šiauliai University, we had before physics education program, but before 2020, this program was fully closed, no students, and the possible situation in your country is different, or not?
Well, maybe it's not so pessimistic, but I think it's still, it's not very optimistic. I think it's open whether in, let's say, 10 or 20 years, physics will survive as a separate subject. Well, one of the reasons is the shortage of the teachers. As I said, now officially, we have about 40% of teachers who teach physics, but are not qualified as a physics teacher. And I think it's typical that our students at their final year of, I mean the 5th or the 4th year of university study, usually are teaching at some school because there is a demand of physics teachers. So once they got bachelor degree, they quite easily find some place at a school to teach, though they are not officially fully qualified teachers. So there is a shortage of teachers, and then, of course, pragmatically for some schools, it might be interesting or just a solution to have some common subject. And I think with the physics at the secondary school level or higher secondary school level, it's again the problem with math. Because we need math, or at least at some extent, we need math, and math fluency is not growing. If I say diplomatically, it's not growing. And of course, then it's more difficult, even more difficult, to build some mathematical model and to solve it in physics if the skills in math are not developing. So it's really open question. On the other hand, I would say I would be a little bit optimistic because, for instance, at Charles University in Prague or at Out University, we now have, let's say, around 8 or 10 in Prague. It's a little bit more, let's say 10 or 15 graduates as physics teachers. And the number was increasing in our department for several years, by one, of course, not by many people, but by one. The question is whether we are now at the top, because there is also a demographic development. So just now we have a demographic wave, a little bit increase at secondary schools and at entering now universities. So in, let's say, 6-7 years, there again will come a decline of demographic decline. I think only Prague and Brno, as big cities, regions, are supposed or projected to have increasing number of population. Now, dramatically, it was changed with the refugees because I think in 2022 we got more than 40,000 pupils from Ukraine and basic school as primary and secondary level. So there is a change, and still at our universities we have a percentage of Slovakian students. It's interesting that still even Russian students and then Ukrainian students. So it may be changed in this way that we might have. It's interesting that even students from Slovakia are studying to become physics teacher in our country. It's not typical, but we have those examples. But as you say, I think it's still open whether physics will be as a subject. I think it's another way of a physics if as a scientific branch, because if you look at magazines like Nature or Science, who are said to be that they are representative for science, I think more than 50% of articles is devoted to medicine, to biology, to genetics manipulations and things like that. So some people say that while 100 years ago physics was a very good established subject, one of the was running the scientific development, now the biology and genetics are the branches who are developing fast. But of course it may change in some years. So you are true that we cannot say that now the physics education is at its best. But on the other hand, I really enjoy sharing experiences, not only our discussion, but also next week I will be joining some seminar in the United States about using their resources and so on. So I really enjoy this possibility to really share experiences and to bring inspiration from abroad. As I said, not everything is just transferable, but at least it's an inspiration and makes me to think about how to adopt it probably for my needs and my usage.
Yes, because we can say again that it's somehow also policy insights, because different countries have different educational policies and governance also structures, etc. And it's really important. Okay, and possible another question, because it's also common in Lithuania and possible not only in Lithuania, so-called gender differences, because for example, the domain of natural sciences like physics, chemistry, and biology, engineering, ICT, etc., is really dominated by male students. And in opposite, let's say languages, social sciences, etc., female students are overrepresented. And it's really observable situation in Lithuania for many years, but possible situation in Czechia is different.
Well, I think in general it's similar, but if you take the tertiary level, I think there is more girls than males entering as a student. So even disciplines like medicines, for instance, I would say are now more occupied by women's, at least at the basic level. I think the change is at the PhD level. Then the number of males is dominating to females. And I think in education in general, I do not have statistics for science education, but in education in general, I think we have 77% of students preparing to become teacher being females. So, and I think even in teaching physics, it's about half and half. I wouldn't say that we have more males. And I think the main reason is that in general, there is more girls or females in a tertiary level. And another feature is that I think with females that they have a lower mortality. It's not a nice word, but you probably understand what I mean, that they less often give up. Males are more often giving up the study when they meet some difficulties, but the girls are more motivated to overtake those things. So that's another feature. So I would say that it's half and half. And even with the chemistry department, I would say that the number of prospective teachers is about 50-50 between males and females. Certainly, as you say, because branches like arts, philosophy are even more typical for girls. But it's naturally connected with the fact that we have more, I think, like 60 to 40% in tertiary level between girls and males. But it's different in the PhD level. Then it's still more male dominant part of the system.
Okay. And because also having in mind somehow time limit, possibly we will not go into our next part about teacher education because it's really so serious, it's so important area, and possibly we will postpone this discussion to our next time, and because it would be really interesting to know more about teacher education in your country. But anyway, you mentioned the shortage of teachers, in particular physics teachers. But possibly we have a solution, so-called artificial teacher, or based on artificial intelligence. Why not? What do you think? It's a little bit provocative, but anyway.
Well, I think it strongly depends, because in discussion of education, we are sometimes mixing something like professional development and some general education. And I think in general, the shift is towards the skills for professional life. It's also that I think economy is affecting the decision of Ministry of Education and things like that. So I would say that yes, it may work from professional development. For instance, if I want to learn to use some, let's say, computer program, it's quite common that I take some online course or online course about photography and things like that. On the other hand, and it's also discussed even with the fact about our work, the general school education is also a social feature, not just the content, but also social interaction. Again, I would say that one of the shifts with education within the 30 years, it's more and more individual, and the demand is to respect the individual's needs and so on. But on the other hand, I would say that the more we need then the social interactions and trying to make people to cooperate and communicate together. It's really difficult to see if you have, for instance, some elections that it's splitting families and even friends. And so I strongly believe that it's not possible to just replace teachers as a personalities automatically with just artificial intelligence. Of course, it's an important feature. We are all, I think, trying to work with it in some way. For instance, I think this High School of Economy in Prague now cancelled bachelor thesis because of artificial intelligence, and it's discussed in other branches. Well, I must say that I, as a physicist, or I think my colleagues in chemistry, we still hope that the experimental work, for instance, in the lab, is still quite far from being done by artificial intelligence. While, of course, some research or finding resources, some making summaries and so on, yes, these are ways that might be done more or less with artificial intelligence. But on the other hand, it's still important to check the results, because I was, of course, playing with ChatGPT, I must say, with the free version, so not the highest version. And I simply found some mistakes in geographical notes and so on. So I think it's a great tool. It may change a lot of, but I still believe that education is about people interaction. So I don't think that we can replace the teacher completely.
But possible the best teachers or teachers like personalities for elite education and artificial intelligence for mass education.
Yes, but that's a question. Again, we are coming back to the problem of the Czech education. If we are saying that our educational system has problem with splitting the careers and keeping the differences, then it would be something which is even strengthening the differences between the people. Well, anyway, some people say that the technology development is naturally increasing the differences between people who have the tools under their control and use them, and between the people who are not using them. So yes, that's the possibility, but we will see, of course, because into the school system you have many pressures, many intentions. Something is coming from the industry. They need some kind of working force. Something is coming for another side. And now with this our strategy, the new strategy 2034, there is a stress on digital education, but there is a great paradox, I think, because if something is changing very quickly, that's the digital technology. Even if you write about teaching technology and you look at your articles that are 5 or 7 years old, you are saying, oh dear, that's overcome, it's not very useful. So that means the shift to something which is quite a short time of usage. Of course, the algorithms and principles are something which has permanent value, but just using the tools is something which is not very long term. So yes, it's very open and it's difficult to say, or at least for me, it's difficult to say.
Yeah, it's a little bit provocative, but it's really a burning issue. And possibly we do not need any more scholars, for example, because everyone can become a scholar by using artificial intelligence, for example, or artificial intelligence versus collective intelligence.
Oh, yes. It is, yes. I know that, for instance, MIT is running their mass online courses, which are quite popular. And of course, even economists, of course, say, well, it's much better than to have 30 students in your class to teach, let's say, 1,000 or 5,000 But I traditionally think that what was the most lasting thing for me in my education system was the way that I could follow my supervisors, my teachers, how they think, how they are trying to attitude to problems, and of course to share some of their values. Maybe it's an old-fashioned point of view, but for me it seems still like an important value in education.
Okay, and Lucas, last question, a little bit provocative. Let's imagine that you became a Minister of Education in Czech Republic. What would you change first or immediately?
Well, it's a difficult question because I wouldn't like to be at this position. But if it happened, well, I think I'm not very fan of the permanent reform. I believe in education in gradual development because even for me to adopt a teaching method, it is not effective if I'm ordered to use it. It's much better if I learn it or I experience it on myself, and then I try to adopt into my personality and so on. So I would say that it's important to support the teachers in their exchange of experiences, to support the communities of teachers of subject, to build the communities and shares. I think it's something which is said to be common in Finland, for instance, that the teachers at school have regular meetings exchanging and consulting the problems and have a space for that. And that I would say would be for me the most important thing to start. And of course, then it's a permanent discussion with the organization, schools, and parts of the system. And I think that's a very painful part. I think as a Minister of Education, you must fight on your money in the state budget, because it was reduced in the Czech Republic in the percentage of GDP. So that's I think an important task for any Minister of Education.
Yes. By the way, I have this information on my notes, because since 1990 in Czechia, the share of funding for education has varied by around plus or minus 5% of GDP. Possible now it's bigger number, but anyway, we will not.
No, now it's just 4.5.
Yeah, plus or minus 5, around 5. Okay, let's somehow finalize, because money is a difficult issue to be discussed. Yes, thank you very much for our discussion. It's really a fruitful and interesting discussion, and I think we will continue somehow in the near future. At least I will invite you, obviously, next semester to, for example, to give online lecture to my master students, because it's quite interesting and useful. And possibly you want to summarize shortly or say something as final word?
Well, first, I would like to thank you for inviting me. And of course, I'm ready if you're interested to interact with your students, because even for me, it's interesting to get their experience and their point of view. Well, as I say, I think for me, the main is that the education is under permanent development, but I think not permanent reform. I strongly believe in evolution in education.
Okay, Lukas, and thank you very much for our nice discussion, and in particular for your time, because time is, let's say, most expensive in our life. And I wish you big success in your future, in your academic work, in your academic life, and obviously in your personal life. And possible we will meet not only online, possible we will meet again somewhere, sometime in the near future, because let's hope, as how is Hawking physics, well-known physicist Stephen Hawking said, if I remember well, if we have life, we have hope. Hope is us, something like that. And okay, thank you very much once again.
Okay, thank you very much, and I also sincerely hope that it's not our last interaction, and I'm also looking forward to see you also personally one day.